104.7 The Cave, KKLH, Marshfield, Springfield, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Touchdown, Kansas City!
Now, it's time for Ned Talk.
So there I was, sleeping at my desk when Ned Reynolds came in and shook me awake and said, "Come on, Joe, it's time to talk about sports." And here we are in the studio talking about sports. It's Ned Talk, your local live sports talk show, brought to you by The Dive on Patent. I am Joe Westen, sleepy and all, joined by Ned Reynolds.
I'm glad you said that I shook you awake as opposed to kicking your chair out from under you.
Yeah. Josh Roberts would have kicked my chair out from underneath
No, I
me.
would have patted you on the head till you woke
Aw,
up.
yeah. How are you fellas doing today?
Great, thank you. It's a beautiful Sunday in the Ozarks. How could you not be?
Oh, yeah, this is my kind of weather, Ned. I like this.
It is nice.
So let's start out with a critique of the coverage of Taylor Swift last week in New York. Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, Blake Lively, they were all there. It wasn't as much fun for them, though, was it? It wasn't as much fun as that Chicago Bears game because it was a little bit closer, and so
Yeah.
they weren't sure what was going on with the game.
Actually, it was a very good football game. New York Jets are very underrated, folks. They can play defense. Now, their offense a little bit on the shaky side, but a 23-20 game. And as far as the Taylor Swift coverage is concerned,
Ned,
I'm remaining mute on that.
Okay.
Ned stays mute.
Fair enough. But let me ask you this question to start things out. Do you think the Jets are underrated, or do you think the Chiefs played down to their level?
I think the Jets underrated. I don't think the Chiefs, their offense has been a little stagnant. And there's understandably why. After all, you're a Super Bowl champion. You know all your weapons, although I wonder whether or not Mahomes does know all his weapons. His receiving core is relatively new, and he has, to some extent, struggled a little bit in completing. He doesn't have anywhere near the completions that he's had a year ago. Case in point is, I think he had, 260-some yards against the Jets, and under normal circumstances, he's about 350, 375, somewhere in that vicinity. So you do have a limitation in what they've been doing. But are they taking their foot off the pedal, which is what you're suggesting? And I don't think so. I think these teams may have, in fact, caught up a little bit with them. The team they're playing today, the Minnesota Vikings, not a very good defensive team not at all. I mean, the Chiefs are going to score. But can the Chiefs' defense stop Minnesota, which has a very high-powered offense? I think you run into a circumstance where every team is different. And, Joe, I know you're going to make fun of this. I've said it all before. These are all pro athletes and all stars in college. Hey, the talent level, there's a parity there.
What about you, Josh? What are your thoughts?
Well, I said from the beginning of the season that the Jets were the team to look out for with Aaron Rodgers. And then with him going down, it seemed like, like I said, the curse of the Jets continues. But it looked like this was Zach
Wilson.
This was Zach Wilson's coming out game because he played really well, and that's why that game was so close. The Jets have a great defense. They've got depth on defense, and he is trying to become a starting quarterback instead of being the backup. And he did a great – I give him a lot of credit for that game being so close. He played a really good game. The Chiefs have some chinks in the armor that they need to shore up. They've got the talent. My biggest critique of the Chiefs is that their offense is capable of running anyone out of the stadium, and they just don't do it. So in a way, they do kind of play down to the level of their competition. And I don't know if it's a subconscious thing or if they're doing it consciously. I don't know. But I feel like the Chiefs, when their offense wants to, they can almost score at will. They get too cutesy with what they're doing, and they play around a little too much.
If your supposition is correct, then you can blame the play calling of Mike Nagy. This is a new offensive coordinator. He's new this year. He's not new to the Chiefs. He's spent some time with the Chicago Bears as head coach. But he's replacing Bieniemy, who has been in there and had established a rhythm. So maybe there is a bit of a difference in the rhythm that they get into that Mahomes calls out there. But I still think it's a matter of other teams adjusting to what Chiefs do.
Oh, and I think that's the other thing. Everybody, they're the Super Bowl champs. So they're going to get everybody's A game every week.
That's right.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate here because I really felt like the Chiefs played down to a poor New York Jets team. And I was not that impressed with the Jets defense. I thought the Chiefs ran up and down the field on them. And then Patrick Mahomes got cute. And he admitted this week he has not played very well. He tried to throw a touch pass, and it was intercepted.
Yeah.
And you saw Andy Reid go over and say, okay, that's fine. Let's get back to what we do. What's he do? He goes back out, and he attempts another touch pass, and it gets intercepted again.
Yeah.
And to me, is my time coaching, it's okay to make a mistake. It's not okay to make another mistake because you made that mistake. And that is what Patrick Mahomes did. That was a mental error on that second interception. And I felt like the Chiefs let them back in the game. I think the Chiefs' defense made that game a little bit closer than what it should be. I think if there's any part of the Jets that's underrated, it was that offensive line, because they gave Zach Wilson plenty of time to throw. And
True.
I think you put almost anybody back there, Zach Wilson, Josh Roberts, Ned Reynolds, Joe Westen, they're going to complete some passes because they had time to throw. So I've really felt that the Chiefs didn't play that well, that they were beating themselves in this game.
Maybe it's the Taylor Swift. Again, I hesitate to even mention the thing because there's a lot of nonsense. But maybe it's the presence that all the media is giving. I don't know. I disagree, Joe. I don't think they did play down. I think the Jets played up and played to their capabilities. But be that as it may, it was a 23-20 game and a lot closer, although it is not closer than what all of us thought. We thought it'd be a close game. I predicted, 25-17 or something. You guys all had it close.
Yeah, I didn't think they would cover the spread.
I think I was 31-14. I had it pretty far apart.
Yeah.
And honestly, I thought that's where we were headed in the first half.
Oh, after the first quarter.
The Chiefs were dominant.
17-0.
So, I mean, but you know what happens, though, with the Kansas City Chiefs? They're dominant, and then Patrick Mahomes blows basically 2 possessions by trying to be cute and throwing touch passes.
Now, you say that, guys, but is it the fact that maybe the defensive scheme has made some adjustments and he has to look out for them? There were some. I did see it. The Jets' defensive backfield did some shifting instead of the linebackers doing a lot of blitzing, and they did blitz on occasion. And when the offensive line was able to beat that blitz, you saw what Mahomes was able to do.
Right.
But they did make adjustments out there, and that may have fooled the quarterback for a little while. There are just so many nuances that these pro athletes go through.
That's true, but the quarterback gets blamed for the bad plays no matter what the real reason is. And so that's part of being the starting quarterback for a football team is you're gonna, if you throw an interception, you're getting blamed for that interception. It doesn't matter if the ball was tipped. It doesn't matter if the D-back read you and cut you off. You threw that interception. And those 2 interceptions that he threw, I shook my head and I was like, what is he doing? Both times. Because I agree with you. And that's my criticism.
He was trying to lob a pass over somebody's head.
Yeah.
And in the NFL, maybe you can get away with that every once in a while, but
against a bad team,
you've got to zip the football in there most of the time to make it make it work.
Because it is all about the timing, which, Ned, you talk about that all the time. They're throwing to a spot. They're not throwing to a person. He tried to throw to a person on both of those interceptions.
And the unfamiliarity of his receivers, because my thought is on both those passes, if your defenders are in front of the receiver, we both know what Tyreek Hill would have done. He would have been zipped down the sideline.
Gone, yeah.
And it wouldn't have been a touch pass. It would have been more of a line drive sort of pass kind of thing, and that's what would happen. But I think the receivers are still trying to learn their way around it. One of the things that surprised me when I pulled up statistics for the Chiefs, their number 1 receiver this season, do you know who it is?
Kelsey.
Nope.
Kadarius Toney?
Nope.
Who is it?
Justin Watson.
Watson, the Penn kid? Yeah.
Oh, nice.
It's not nice because you're looking at this is the guy that's got your most receiving yards on your team.
Right.
So where are the other guys at in this that he's trying to feel comfortable with? Where's Scantling been at this year? Where Rashid Rice, I think he's gone away from him a little bit because he's dropped a couple of passes.
Yeah.
Where's Tony been at? Where are the bigger names, even though nobody in this group is really a big name? Where are they at receiving yard-wise with this team?
Your point is very well taken. I brought that up earlier. It's because he has a receiving core with whom he is not familiar. And as we pointed out, it isn't throwing to the person. It's throwing to a spot where they should be. Watson can pick those things out. That's what he did. He's an Ivy Leaguer guy from Penn, one of the very few Ivy Leaguers in the NFL. He can, and that's how they throw in the NFL, or in the Ivy League, 2 spots. They do mostly in college as well. But he's able to do something like that because it's something he's accustomed to. The others have survived on their native ability.
Right. The fact that they were taller or faster.
Exactly.
Or, could jump higher. Yeah. I think you're right. But yeah, I mean, it's always funny because we're pointing out the things that we see as flaws with the Chiefs, and they still won the game, which is good. But our expectation level is so high with the Chiefs now.
Exactly.
Because they're world champions.
You're listening to Ned Talk, your local live sports talk show brought to you by The Dive. I'm Pat, and the best place to watch the Chiefs games this year, downtown Springfield. The comments made this week by Tyreek Hill, I don't know if either one of you read those, where he said the refs saved the Chiefs in the Super Bowl and saved the Chiefs last Sunday night.
With the crucial penalties that were called.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know. I don't think so. I'm partial because, as you guys know, I know one of them personally, and a great guy, and I think they're as honest as they could possibly be. There are different ways of interpreting calls, of course. And does the favored team get the nod? Maybe not consciously, maybe subconsciously. You can't really explore somebody's subconscious. But when a team is favored and overpowering and all that sort of thing, maybe they do. But I didn't think that made a difference.
Did you consult with your friend this week about that call late in the game?
I did.
And what did he say?
I'm not going to tell you what he said, but he did not. Let's say he saw it a different way.
Did not see it as a penalty.
He said, in all honesty, there are times in the ball game when you don't make certain calls if they're ticky-tack, and that's how he.
Right.
What'd you think?
Well, you know that I think the NFL is scripted anyway. And so that illustrates my point, unfortunately, whether it's true or not. Those penalties are happening every play. They just don't get called every play. They don't get called every play because the action is far enough away from them that the referees are watching the action, or it doesn't happen in the purview that they're watching. But holding happens on offense every play. Defensive holding and defensive contact, illegal defensive contact happens on every play. It's the way the game has evolved. It's the way the game has developed. So those penalties do influence the outcome of games, whether intentionally or unintentionally, because as a fan, we see them happening and not being called, and then suddenly they do get called for whatever reason.
I can't argue that point because they do. It's a game of physical contact, and yes, you are going to have what would be perceived as being a foul. But does it influence the play at the time? That's what an official has to decide.
Right.
And where, in fact, does it occur? Is it a crucial time? And the crucial time, and I think most officials will, in any sport, will allow this to be the case. If it's going to be, it's got to be a very perceivable foul and something that's going to influence the outcome of the ball game, then you make a call. But if it's not, you don't call it just because it happened like 50 yards away from the line of contact or
exactly.
whatever.
And that's the thing, is if it is a crucial play and it prevents that play from happening, or if it greatly influences what would have been the outcome of that play, I feel like they have to call it.
And that was
but when
argument.
It's away from the play that's happening and they call it anyway, that's when people like me start to think, well, why did they do that?
Precisely last week's call, because it was not involved with the play
Right.
at all. And the interception was made and then called, and it was way off on the other side. However, I can't argue with your perception of it because it would have. I disagree with your philosophy. I don't think it's scripted that way, but you got to make a judgment somewhere along the line. and this individual with whom has some very distinct feelings about that too. But we better not get into that.
All right, we always try to break down the season by quarters, and the first quarter of the season's over. Hard to believe, but
Yeah,
we
it's
were already
crazy.
through it.
It went fast.
And the Chiefs are 3-1. I think the prediction from you, Mr. Reynolds, was 4-0.
That was.
And I think you went 3-1.
Yep, I said 3-1, but I thought the Jets would beat them.
I don't remember what I said going into this, but I probably 4-0. So now we're looking at we begin the second quarter.
MC says probably 4-0.
I don't remember.
He didn't write it down.
Honestly,
It's
don't
all right.
remember. You remember you had to wake me up at my desk
I
today.
think you
so
did say 4-0.
Maybe.
I think you did.
Yeah.
I think we were all surprised that they lost to Detroit. I mean, Detroit is a good team, but we thought the Chiefs would come out and put on a better show right out of the gate, and they didn't.
Well, I think that what you said is true, is very accurate. That some of these teams are not good.
Yeah.
I think Detroit's overrated. What I saw of the Jets last week, I think what you guys have said about them's overrated. But you're going to get the best, whether it's the best team in the NFL or it's the worst team in the NFL. The Chiefs are going to get the best of that team that week.
Oh, yeah.
That is that team's Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, it is, because you want to talk about motivation, especially for a team that's not playing well. You go out and beat the world champions. That is a great motivating factor for your team.
Well, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what we think is going to happen in the second quarter of the NFL season with the Chiefs. It's Ned Talk, brought to you by The Dive on Patton.
Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
About 36 minutes away from the start of the Chiefs pregame show, a little after 3 o'clock, the kickoff today. Chiefs, Minnesota Vikings, start of the second quarter of the Chiefs season. And this team's really interesting that they're playing today, Minnesota, because I think a lot of people felt going into the season they could be the team that it was going to be in the Super Bowl out of the NFC. They have certainly not played like a championship team.
We only have one win.
Yep.
They're 1-3, and this is difficult for them too, because that is right. They're very high expectations. Kirk Cousins, who he is in his free agent year after the season is over, is a solid quarterback. He can throw. He's also 35 years old, and that can catch up with you as well. Does he have the component parts around him on offense? Yes. This is a very good offensive football team. It is also a very poor defensive football team. That is where they really have to shore up things. This team that the Chiefs are going to see today absolutely loves to blitz. They will blitz on maybe not every play, but they will certainly put a concerted effort into going after Patrick Mahomes. And you know what? Come right into my ballpark, guys. That's exactly what I want you to do, because that Chiefs offensive line forms such a pocket around him that the blitz tends to run right by Mahomes, and he runs forever whenever that. You saw it with the Jets. That's how they beat the Jets, with those long runs that he had. Well, if that's what Minnesota's going to do, and it is what they're going to do, then there's going to be trouble for them. But it's a good team. I think it's going to be a very high-scoring game.
Interesting matchup, because I know a lot of people felt that Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings could be in the NFC Championship game this year.
It's not over yet.
And they've not played very well to start the season.
It's pro football. Anything can happen.
Yeah, on any given Sunday, as we say. Coming up after that, though, they've got 3 division games, 2 against Denver, 1 against the Chargers. Let's talk about Denver for a minute. I think, pundits and the media and everything that you want to, all this group of people that you want to put together and say, going into the season, they felt like Sean Payton was the savior for Denver, and they have not played very good football. They came really close to going 0-4.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for a comeback win. Russell Wilson is a villain in Denver right now. He's not very well thought of. And I saw this morning where they have been fielding phone calls about trade deadline for their receivers. So do you think, even though you say it's very early in the year, there's some teams that are going, all right, let's start to look to next season and see what we can build, because this season we're just going to write off.
No, I don't think that happens. I really don't, unless you're 1-15 on the year, or maybe 2-14 or whatever, a dismal out of the running record. I don't think they do that. I think there's still time for these teams to come around, but Denver has to be very introspective about what they're doing. They had 70 points lead on them by the Miami Dolphins, and you don't give up that amount of points and not have some kind of at least a representative football team as well. Denver has some work to do. I'm not selling them short yet. Russell Wilson's still a really, really good ball player. Does he have the parts around him? Sean Payton's a good coach. He's proven himself, but if you don't have the horses out there to do it, we'll find out whether or not Denver does. That's going to be a tough assignment for both those teams, because here they are. Well, I'm assuming, now I'm making a mistake here, I'm assuming that Denver plays today. I don't think this is their off day, is it?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Well, take a look at the schedule and see, because it's not obviously for the Chiefs, and they're going to have to come back and play several days later against the Denver Broncos in Kansas City. That'll be to their favor, playing them in KC.
Yeah, it's a short week for the Chiefs. They play on Thursday.
But, yeah, it's Denver, though. I'm questioning.
Yeah. Let me look here.
If they have an off week, then
they play the Jets today.
Okay, so it's an off week an on week for both teams, so they'll have the limited amount of time to get ready for this. But that'll be awfully tough to come back and play on a Thursday. I'm not personally in favor of these Thursday games. Yes, on Thanksgiving, that's fine. But now it's all part of the schedule. And in the latter part of the season, they'll be able to flex on a Thursday. That really is tough. But be that as it may, this is going to be, there it is, the Denver Broncos are playing in Denver. So they have to come to Kansas City on a Thursday night. That will be tough. Who are the other teams? It's the Chargers, the Broncos twice, and today's game.
Minnesota, yeah. I mean, that's the one game I do want to ask you about, because if there's a Ned Reynolds darling in the NFL, it's the Chargers.
Chargers, correct. Mm-hmm.
And they played so.
They always play well against Kansas City.
Yeah, they do.
Always.
But their defense isn't very good.
In the game that they play, which will be in the third week of that quartet that you have there, is that in Los Angeles?
No, it is in Kansas City.
In Kansas City. Well, yep. I have to give the Chiefs maybe a 4-0 in this second quarter.
What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I think they'll go 4-0 in this quarter of the season.
There's Travis. Look at him.
The Vikings just don't have the talent that everyone thought they had, or the talent that they had last year, or something's happened. I don't know. They were a solid team last year, and then it's all kind of crumbled this year.
Dalvin Cook, from their backfield, him being absent, going to another team, that made a very big difference.
Huge difference.
I don't think Kirk Cousins is a winner as a quarterback.
Well, I'm not sold on him either.
I don't put my faith in him.
Yeah, I'm not sold on him either. I think he's done okay, but okay doesn't get you too far in the NFL. I think the Donkeys are a mediocre team at best. You know, Russell Wilson has proven that he's not the superstar that he could have been, in my opinion. And Sean Payton is a criminal. I don't know why he still keeps getting chances to be a head coach. I guess he's going to break some other rule this year that he hasn't broken yet. So couldn't have happened to a nicer team.
So, I mean, do you look at, we talk about trap games. Do you see any of these as being trap games? I think the Chiefs will be very well prepared for the Los Angeles Chargers, and Denver. I mean, they know those three teams extremely well. Those three games, they'll know the teams extremely well. Is today's game, by any stretch of the imagination, what you would call a trap game?
If in fact the Chiefs run into a situation in which they're turning the ball over and maybe fall too far behind the Vikings, I don't think that's possible. But no, I don't really view this one as a trap. Last week's game, I've said it on the show here, I had bad thoughts about that one. I thought the Jets on a Monday night in New York would be perfectly capable of coming through and pulling off a big, big win with their crowd, and it was a Sunday night, not a Monday night. The Monday night's game was also in New York.
Yeah.
But the fact is that they weren't able to do it, and a strange call at the end had perhaps ramifications. But that's the one that I worry about. I don't really have any concerns on this one today. I think the Chiefs will win in a high-scoring game. But, Joe, as we said, when you're up against a team that has a very good and powerful offense. What Cousins has, terrific receivers. Justin Jefferson is nothing short of outstanding. The new running back, Alexander Madison, is perfectly capable. He's a kid who can get things done. They've got a good yardage factor on offense. If they can score and maybe show some failings in the Kansas City defense, yeah, there might be some problems, but I don't foresee it.
Let's talk about the Kansas City defense for just a second. Not a stellar night for defense that so far this season has been very, very good, but I also don't think a bad night for them either. They just didn't get to the quarterback. I think that was the biggest problem for them. Is that defense is really predicated on pressure on the quarterback, and that takes care of what happens in the secondary. Do you think, Ned, that the Nick Bolton injury might be the cause for that?
You're not relying on one player, although he is a very formidable part of their linebacking core. It's hard to say, Joe. I'm thinking that Bolton may be back today and play a limited aspect today.
Still listed as questionable right now.
It's an ankle injury that he has. I think maybe the way the game morphs out will depend on whether or not he plays and if the Chiefs can play a solid level of defense. The Chiefs' defense is going to be put to a test, at least in the early going, because Cousins can get that offense running. He has good receivers, especially the Jefferson kid, and the defensive backfield there are some questions about it.
I've heard the Jefferson kid is the best-looking wide receiver in football.
Well, his numbers are pretty damn good.
Anybody that watches TV got that one. What do you think, Josh?
About the Nick Bolton thing, I think he does make a good amount of difference there. I think that was part of why they couldn't get as much pressure on the quarterback against the Jets. And if he is back and is healthy enough to play, then that hopefully they will get more pressure on Cousins. But you're exactly right. I mean, if they had come up against a really stout offensive line and they can't get pressure on the quarterback, then that's where the
scheme breaks down.
Well, yeah, and that's where the flaws in their D-backs become apparent, because they've got a good defensive backfield, but they're not. I don't feel like they're a great defensive backfield. They're still developing and could be one, but I think they do give up a lot of passing yards and touchdowns.
One of the keys today will be Snead, because he'll be the man on Jefferson, one-on-one, more than likely, assuming they play the man defense. But it'll be a challenge for them. But no, I don't see it as being a fatal one, so to speak.
When we come back, we'll talk about Dick Butkus. We'll talk about baseball playoffs, all right here in Ned Talk, brought to you by The Dive. I'm Patton.
Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
20 minutes away from the start of the Chiefs pregame show right here on 104.7 The Cave, your home for the Kansas City Chiefs in Southwest Missouri. I am Joe Westen along with Ned Reynolds. Josh Roberts. Dick Butkus passed away this week at the age of 80. The guy that probably more than any other player defined the linebacker position in the NFL.
He defined the Chicago Bears, too, as being the team of broad shoulders and toughness and all that. Never did get to the playoffs, but the fact of the matter remains that Chicago, the city of Chicago, is renowned for its broad shoulders and hard work and so forth and so on. And Butkus defined that. He was, prior to his becoming a Chicago Bear and prior to his going to Illinois, Chicago Bears in their heyday were known as the Monsters of the Midway. Now, that was not during Butkus' time with the Bears, but he personified that. They had guys like Bill George, who was also a very tough linebacker, and Butkus succeeded him, and they were both really tough. Now, when I say really tough, they carried it to a new extreme, because this guy you could have labeled him mean out there as a linebacker. He went after people. What was it? Do you guys remember a running back named MacArthur Lane?
Yeah.
Who was in the NFL back in the 70s and 80s. A good ball player out of Utah. Played for the Chiefs a little bit toward the end of his career. But MacArthur Lane once said, "I would much rather much rather be wrestling a grizzly bear than running against this guy right here because he's going to manhandle you. And teams tried to run away from him and couldn't do it. He was just there all the time. Tough, very tough.
A few years back, I mean, it's been 20 or more years, a really fabulous documentary about the NFL was put together by NFL Films. And they had some interviews with Dick Butkus, and it really sticks out in my mind. He said, when that player wakes up in the morning in the hospital, I want him to know that he got hit by Dick Butkus.
Right.
But they went on to show some film of what happened late. And Butkus only played 9 seasons, 8 of those all-pro. But that hitting took its toll on him, too.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed what happened to Dick Butkus in the last years of his career, that players sought him out after the play to hit him.
Yeah.
And they showed one particular incident where he was standing over the pile and a player just rolled him up. And the play was over, whistle blown, and the guys were taking their opportunity to get retribution against Dick Butkus for all the things he did. And he knew it was time to get out of the NFL. And he had a career as a spokesman, and he was on TV and movies and did a bunch of stuff, but he really defined the linebacker position. And you spoke about who he replaced, and he was replaced by Richard Dent, who also defined the linebacker position in the NFL and played for the Chicago Bears as well. So,
well, they've had a number of them. My favorite comment, though, that I saw was from Deacon Jones, who's a great All-Pro with the Los Angeles Rams. Deacon Jones says, Dick Butkus does not hit an individual with the intent of putting him in the hospital. It's with the intent of putting him in the cemetery. That's that's tough, guys.
Well,
great player.
Yeah, and if you look at highlights of his career, that was back in a time when you could club people in the side of the helmet with your forearm, and he used it to great delight and to great effect. Mm-hmm. And that's how a lot of his success was. He was so strong and so powerful, and you hit these offensive linemen upside their head, and they're dazed for a second, and you're gone. You're on the ball carrier, on the quarterback, and he has to be one of the major reasons why rules were established to stop that from happening, because they're like, he's knocking people unconscious.
And that's a good point, because they being the rules committee do formulate their rules to perhaps answer what other players are doing, and not just in football, but in other sports. Mike Singletary is another one who has to be mentioned as a really tough linebacker.
Yeah.
And he followed Butkus in his career. It's just the level of individuals and their thinking process of guys who play at middle linebacker and outside linebacker. You're supposed to be the tackler. Yeah. That's why you're there.
You deliver the hits. And that when I think of middle linebacker, I think of the Chicago Bears, because then after that you had Brian Urlacher, who was a dominant middle linebacker as well. They have this great history of exceptional middle linebackers, and Dick Butkus was the first.
Quick note
close to the first.
Quick note on the Chiefs. We've talked about the defense all season long. They are tied. They are actually in second place right now for points allowed in the season. They are at 60 points. There's only 2 teams better than them, and I believe, let me try to get through this really quickly and tell you those 2 teams. One of them is the San Francisco 49ers, who I think could be in the Super Bowl this year, and the other is the Baltimore Ravens, who are playing right now and only giving up 3 points. So just a quick note about that.
Well, in the power rankings, San Francisco's number 1 in all. There's several power ranking polls, but in every one of them, 49ers are number 1.
Let's talk about the baseball playoffs. Ned, if there was anything to help back up your dislike for this extra round of playoffs, it was this year's first round of the playoffs, because it was 2 and done, I think, all across the board, wasn't it?
It was 2 and done. 2 and done. And in the next round, the divisional playoffs, which are underway now, here you have the 2 highest winning teams, the Dodgers and the Braves, and the Baltimore Orioles make it 3. All lose in the first round.
Yeah, the only seeded team that won was the Houston Astros in Game 1.
Were you surprised at any of the teams that went out in the first round?
In that initial two, no, because they're wild card teams, and they're there because they are wild card teams. That's how they have it matched up. So no, in a wild card playoff, most of the home teams all played all 3 games, and there were not 3 games; they were all in 2-game sweeps. No, not really, because in wild card anything can happen. But in the divisional playoffs, where it's 2, 2, and then 1, it's your best of 5. I am surprised at the home teams losing. The Braves don't lose at home. They did 3-0. The Dodgers don't lose at home. What was the Dodgers' record against the Diamondbacks? 1-12. I mean, 12-1. I think whatever it was is overwhelming. And here the Diamondbacks go in and beat them 11-2 last night. How do you explain that? And you have Clayton Kershaw on the mound. Come on.
I just say momentum. I mean, because we talk about this all the time. These players, these teams that get hot at the end of the season, they carry that into the playoffs. It's what the Phillies did last year,
and they're doing it
now.
And
the Phillies did it in Game 1. The Arizona Diamondbacks did it in Game 1. The teams, all 3 of those teams that beat those top seeded teams, it's momentum. The one surprise for me in the first round, though, is that Milwaukee didn't even win a game.
They did not, and that was a team I had as a dark horse to get into the series because of their pitching, and it didn't work.
Yeah, they couldn't even get one win. So,
if the one that I've got my eye on that I'm watching pretty closely is that Baltimore-Texas series, and that first game, pretty good game. I think 3-2 was the final score in that one, and that's the kind of game you like to see in the playoffs. You don't like to see an 11-2 game. You like to see a 3-2 well-pitched game. And still kind of grinding my teeth over Jordan Montgomery being traded from the Yankees to the Cardinals, and now he's with Texas, and the Yankees got nothing for him. 0, zip, zilch, because Harrison Bader is no longer a Yankee. So,
Tell you guys, the Texas Rangers are very, very good. You know, they led that whole division for so long this season, then faltered down the stretch. But the fact that they're there and winning is not a surprise. That's a good team.
Always got to be hot at the right time in baseball. And I mean, of course, now is the only time to be hot, because this is the playoffs. You've got to bring it every night.
The way they have it work now, as opposed to the old days, which were the best, when you won your championship in the league and then you went to the World Series, the 2 best teams. It isn't necessarily the case now.
Well, and it's interesting to me because we talk all the time about the streaks and momentum and everything. And when you look at the Dodgers clinched early, the Braves clinched early, Baltimore clinched early, and they did kind of take their foot off the gas. They rested some players. They weren't as concerned about winning. And I think there's a psychology to that as well, because now they're like, suddenly they got to flip that switch back and be in the mode they were in when they were winning. And obviously it didn't work in Game 1.
Another factor too, Josh, is this. They had the whole week off. The other teams have all played. They played 2-game series, but the division winners who had the week from Sunday to Saturday was an idle time. Now you get out and practice, but you do lose a little bit of rhythm doing that.
I'm sure, yeah.
When we come back, we'll do our picks for today's game. We're about 10 minutes away from the start of the Chiefs football pregame show right here on 104.7 The Cave.
Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Nothing says high-scoring football like the Ravens and the Steelers. 10-3 right now, and that's pretty high scoring for those two teams. Yeah, they usually keep it in the pretty much total under 20.
Yeah, especially this season.
Category. It's Ned Talk, your local live sports talk show. We're brought to you by The Dive on Patton Street, the best place to take in the Chiefs games, downtown Springfield. Great people that work there. They really took care of us in our Chiefs happy hour. Let's talk about the game today and get our picks as we're about 5 minutes out from the start of the Chiefs pregame show. Ned, who you got?
Got the Chiefs, but I don't think it's going to be all that easy a contest. Again, I don't have the bad feeling about this one as I did last week when they played the Jets. But today I think the Chiefs have to really rev up and score some points because you know Minnesota is. Their offense is just that good, and Kansas City's shown some vulnerability on defense. I look for a high-scoring game, but I think the Chiefs will come out victorious in this one, and I'm going to say in the neighborhood of, let's say, 37 to 28.
Interesting. An 11-point victory. No, 9-point victory. My math. That's why I work in radio. I'm doing math. All right, what about you, Josh?
What's the point spread on this one?
I believe the Chiefs are favored by 4.
Okay. Favored by 4. Okay. I think the Chiefs will score a lot of points at this one because we talked about how the Vikings defense is not good. So I'm going to say 42 to 20.
42 to 20. That's a big score.
Yeah,
Do you know the over-under in today's game?
Do not know what it is. I would suspect somewhere in the 50s, maybe 51, 52, somewhere around there.
So I'm going over, and they're covering the spread.
Well,
okay.
I'm guessing. I don't know what it is.
Looks like middle of the pack is where the Vikings defense is at. They've given up 95 points this season. They've only scored 90 points so far this season. I don't know. This one's a tough one for me. I'm going to say Chiefs 32, Vikings 7.
Oh, you think they're going to
That's
limit them
total
that much?
dominance.
Well, let's say that I pick with hopefulness. That's how I pick. I don't pick with the statistic. I know some people get the spreadsheets out and look at everything and talk about the weather and the all the background. The brother-in-law of the assistant offensive coordinator
And the
is
factor.
well known with the Chiefs, and they have some inside information. I don't do any of that. I just pick that it's not a stressful game, and I'm able to sit home and just watch it and go, "Oh, okay, this is all right. This is okay." They're not going to stress me out. I got up during the Chiefs game to do something. I was gone for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I went into the bedroom, and my wife had it on in there, and I was just tired. I was like, what happened? What'd you do? I was just in here folding up clothes, and they came back, and I was like, God, just when I leave you in charge of these things, I expect that the Chiefs will be in control, but she apparently didn't let any of that happen. So
weather will
let
not
down.
be a problem in this one, so the game's inside. But over and above all of that, I think the fact that Chiefs defense is really going to be put to the test. And by a severe test, that remains on your perception of the teams playing. But Minnesota will be able to put some points on the board. I think Kansas City has more of them.
What about you, Josh? Any final thoughts? You want to tell us about Alabama? They played well yesterday.
They did. They had to come back and win, but they did come back and win, which was nice. It was a good win. That was a tough Texas A&M team, and we were talking earlier, I guess Petrino blundered in his –
Well, they blame the head coach because he has the final say on this, but maybe Bobby was the one. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But they went for a field goal when they were deep in the territory with waning time remaining, and got the field goal, made it 26-20 as opposed to going for a touchdown. But there was some interesting play calling down the stretch by Texas A&M.
Really quick, Ned, biggest upset yesterday. What was it to you?
Oh, I'd have to say the Louisville-Notre Dame game, with Louisville winning as much as they did.
Josh?
I agree with that. Louisville dominated Notre Dame.
Okay, there you have it. Another round of Ned Talk. We'll be back earlier this week. We'll be on at 5 Thursday night as the Chiefs take on the Denver Broncos from Kansas City. So make plans to join us. I want to say thanks to Corbin Campbell, our mad genius that runs the all the mechanics around here. Mike the intern, Brian Tyndall, Nick Fury, Ned Reynolds, Josh Roberts. We'll see you guys next Thursday night. It's Ned Talk brought to you by The Dive on Patton.